Okay, we're about to begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another regularly scheduled meeting of the Public Safety and Transportation Committee. I am the chair of the committee, Tariq Lucas. Today is Wednesday, March 18th, 2026. We're in the City Council chamber, and please be aware that this meeting is being both video and audio recorded. With me in the chamber are committee members, Councilors Pam Wright, Randy Block, Maria Greenberg, Julie Irish, and Jacob Silber. I was told earlier that Councilor Sean Roach would be arriving a little bit later on Zoom. Also in the chamber with me, not on the committee, are Councilors Josh Krinsman, Councilors Brittany Hume-Charm, and President John Oliver, and Councilor Bixby. Sorry, didn't see you there. Also in the chamber from representing the city, from the mayor's office, the city COO, Josh Morse, from the law department, Ali Giuliani, Chief Timothy Cahoon, and Lieutenant Amanda Henriksen. And of course, our clerk, Miles Starkey, is at the desk. Are there any other counselors on Zoom, Mr. Starkey? Okay, and we have Councilor Farrell on Zoom. And just let me know. So we have one item on our agenda this evening. Let me just read it into the record. Docket number 56-26, discussion on the city's response to ICE. Councilors Greenberg, Charm, Lucas, Kelly, Farrell, Getz, Damubed, Albright, Krinsman, Roach, Mickley, Bixby, Leary, and Irish, requesting a discussion to review who will respond and how the city of Newton will act should Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE, enter the city. The purpose is to ensure that established procedures are properly followed so that all individuals who live and/or work in Newton are protected from ICE engaging in door-to-door actions, harassment, or the unlawful detention of residents and workers. This discussion also serves to reaffirm the city of Newton's continued adherence to its welcoming city ordinance. So I just want to go over what we're going to go over tonight. This is a discussion item. We're going to entertain comments and questions from committee members and non-committee members. Just to be clear, this is not a public hearing. We are not going to take public comments tonight. However, I do want to get a sense from the committee members only, by raising your hand through a straw vote if you would be interested in another meeting in which we would allow public comments at a future date and time. It would likely be a special committee meeting so that other counselors from other committees could attend the meeting as well. So just a quick show of hands if you would be interested in something like that from committee members. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hands up, and there's 6 committee members here. So it is the will of the committee to have another meeting which we would accept public comments, just not tonight, okay? So for tonight, we're going to start off with a presentation from the law department. And are you ready to share your screen, Ms. Giuliani? Okay. And make sure that mic is on and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To kick off our discussion today, I prepared a presentation that highlights the city's welcoming city ordinance, as well as Mayor Laredo's executive order, which was recently enacted. And I will go through slide by slide simply to point out what prohibitions we have put in place and what protections we've put in place for the city. And then I will turn it back over to you, Chair, for further discussion. So as I mentioned, this presentation covers the Newton Welcoming City Ordinance, which was passed by the City Council back in February of 2027. The ordinance reaffirms the city's commitment to making all residents, workers, visitors safe within the city, regardless of their immigration status. A lot has happened in this world since 2017, but just a few weeks ago, Mayor Mark Laredo amplified the commitment of the city by putting in place an executive order to address concerns and in response to what we were seeing across the country in law enforcement of immigration matters by the federal government. So what does the ordinance say? The ordinance highlights, and I have pulled this directly from the ordinance, so we're looking at exactly what the language is. The city does not identify, investigate, arrest, or detain people solely because of their immigration or their perceived immigration status. We do not, our police department doesn't arrest or detain people based on an immigration detainer, administrative warrants, or any other order. We do not notify federal authorities about the release or the upcoming release of any person for immigration purposes. We do not provide federal authorities with information about the upcoming release of a person in custody, again, for immigration purposes. And we do not cooperate or enforce any federal program requiring the registration of individuals on the basis of their religious affiliation or their national origin. I will also add, we do not have any agreement with a federal government. Some have referred to this as 287G agreements. We do not have any such agreements in the city of Newton with a federal immigration enforcement agency. The ordinance does highlight that there are limited circumstances under which the city may cooperate with federal immigration agents or agencies, but those circumstances are few and far between. They include, it would allow for the Newton Police Department to detain or arrest an individual who has, according to information we receive, an outstanding criminal warrant, has a prior conviction for serious violent felony, is someone who's being investigated for terrorism, or if there is a law enforcement or public safety purpose to do so that isn't related to the enforcement of civil immigration law. So those are the circumstances where we could cooperate with federal immigration enforcement agents, but as I said, they are very limited. So immigration information. Our ordinance confirms that the city does not request or maintain information about a person's citizenship or immigration status unless it's required by state or federal law. We also don't investigate or assist in any investigation into someone's immigration status unless it's required by law. There are not very many situations where this unless required by law would be implicated, but for example, we do not ask for this information, nor does the city maintain it as part of our information, but as part of a certain state or federal grant programs or something, or for example, as part of the census, there may be state forms that we are required to follow that ask folks to voluntarily provide that information, but we don't keep that generally, nor do we ask for it of individuals. City resources. Pursuant to the Welcoming City Ordinance, city resources cannot be used to assist in the enforcement of any federal civil immigration law or to gather information about individual citizenship or immigration status. So what are city resources? They are our funds. They are our people, our staff, our city equipment, our city facilities, and our city property. Recently, with Mayor Laredo's executive order, he again amplified this point in protecting city property from being used by the federal government. Our Welcoming City Ordinance covers us well in terms of prohibiting the use of the city's property for federal immigration purposes, but the executive order really doubles down on that in pointing, in highlighting that city-owned or city-controlled property cannot be used as a staging area, processing location, or some sort of operational base in furtherance of civil immigration enforcement operations. The executive order also goes further to say that city property cannot be used for mobilizing, assembling, or for the federal government deploying any of their vehicles, equipment, or personnel, again, in furtherance of enforcing civil immigration. Also amplified in the mayor's executive order is the city of Newton's prohibition on access within our city buildings. So the executive order provides that civil immigration enforcement officials are not allowed into non-public spaces without a valid judicial warrant or a court order to be there. City buildings in the executive order include our schools, libraries, community centers. And the executive order, again, reiterates that those spaces are provided to the public for a specific purpose and certainly not to be used for any other purpose, in particular, enforcement of civil immigration law. And finally, I'll just note that the mayor's executive order highlights and reiterates the city's commitment to public safety. And it highlights that the Newton Police Department will follow already established protocols and longstanding practices that they utilize to ensure public safety, and particularly to protect protests and peaceful protesters. That is our Welcoming City ordinance and the executive order in a nutshell. I turn it back over to you, Chair Lucas, for further discussion.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
If you can just stop sharing the screen, and then we're going to take this into committee. Mr. Greenberg, this is your docket item. You docketed this back in January, I believe, and I know you've been waiting long and hard for this meeting. So you're going to lead us off tonight. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Ms. Giuliani, for that presentation. Appreciate it. Over the past several months, we have all witnessed reports of overly aggressive and reckless tactics used by the Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. These actions have spread fear, mistrust, and confusion in our communities across the country. Many of our residents are experiencing a high level of anxiety and uncertainty as they watch federal enforcement actions unfold. There are widespread concerns about the use of unlawful, excessive, even lethal force, violation of civil rights, and the detention of individuals who pose no threat, including in some cases, families and children. The goal of this docket item is to offer some relief to that uneasiness by providing reassurance, support, and clarity to everyone who lives and works in Newton. I am grateful to Mayor Laredo and Governor Healy having taken important steps to address these concerns by recently issuing executive orders outlining our cities and states' response to federal immigration operations. However, many of us believe that more can and should be done to provide additional clarity, protections, and reassurance for our residents. This docket item is intended to begin that conversation and to explore what further actions our city can take to support and protect the people who live and work in Newton. One such action that would provide reassurance to our residents and city employees would be for the mayor's office to develop clear guidance and training for the frontline workers of our city's departments, particularly our schools, clerk's office, and social service agencies, so they understand their roles and legal responsibilities if they encounter federal immigration enforcement. On your desks are copies of some practical steps from the City of Boston. And we don't have the copies, but Miles has the slides from the Massachusetts Municipal Association that city employees can use if they interact with ICE. A well-trained and confident staff can help prevent harmful outcomes, ensure that situations are handled calmly, lawfully, and appropriately. Can we make a commitment that our staff will receive this type of training? Families with children in our schools, for example, need to know that the city and the school department have a clear plan and policy in place if federal immigration appear at a school. Parents do not need to know every operational detail, but they deserve to hear clearly that there is a thoughtful protocol in place to protect students, respect the law, and ensure that staff know how to respond appropriately. Providing school staff with this guidance and training would help ensure they are prepared and reassure families. Has this happened? Are families aware that such a protocol is in place? So Chair, I would just like, before I go on, answers to some of the questions I've asked.
Sorry, your questions are directed to who?
The administration, whoever could answer, is there a commitment that the staff, the city staff will receive training? And will families know that the school has a protocol in place if ICE goes to a school?
So on the latter question, with respect to Newton Public Schools, I'm certainly not in a position to speak for the school committee or the superintendent. But I hear your question. I certainly will connect with them, and I will get you an answer. With respect to training of city staff, what I would say right up front is that there are a few things that I would want the committee to know. The executive office and our departments, this is something that is top of mind. It's something we talk about quite frequently. We are actively working on. We work with our peer communities, with the state. We are actively monitoring the situation. It's something that is fluid, that we are responding to as information and as new information comes in. We are working on our own internal documents. We're working on some updates to our website. You'll see those soon. And I expect that that's something, again, where this is such a fluid situation, that you'll see those updates. It's not going to be a static system. This can't be a static system because it's ever changing. So stay tuned. There will be some new material on our website, but don't assume that that's the end. I'd love it to be the end because that would mean that we're in a far better place as a country. But I would anticipate that this is something that as new information is provided, we will be able to update and advance those materials. I also think, looking at it today, there's an opportunity to make that information that is available on our website a little more prevalent. Right now, it's on the HHS website. I think there's an opportunity to elevate that a bit so that it's easier to find, not only for those who need it, but those who might be interested in it too.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing about what the school department has to say and how you are formulating how staff will be trained. In regards to the information on the website, I had a difficult time finding it myself. It took going through 3 menus to find it, and it was only in English. You know, I looked at other city websites. They come in multiple languages for that type of information. Since a lot of the folks are immigrants, it would be important that they be able to find it in other languages, that information. And also, it would be important to have just a very succinct form, like the Know Your Rights card. There's an example on everyone's desk. These are cards that are handed out to the public in many of the cities with just very basic facts of what folks should know about their rights in case they encounter ICE. I think that would be something like that would be important to have on the city website. These Know Your Rights cards have been proven to be effective in helping residents understand and assert their rights in high-stress situations. So I look forward to an updated website with that information. Thank you. That's it for me now, Chair.
Okay, all right. I don't see any other hands, so I think I'm going to keep it in committee first. Sorry, Councilor Charm. Any committee members? Councilor Charm, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Thank you for being here tonight, all of you, and for having this discussion with us. I think I speak on behalf of many of us in the city and in the council when I say that what is happening in the news is just deeply upsetting. And we obviously don't want escalations of violence and also people being disappeared and households being torn apart in our community. That said, there is only so much that we can do as a city government, but there is something that we can do. There are things that we can do to be helping our residents, our workers, and those who are visiting Newton be not only be safe, but also feel safe. And I think those are, two things that I am consistently keeping in mind to say, what more could we be doing? And I think we have heard from many members of our community, those who are, frequent protesters and speaking out every Saturday at noon in Newton Center against the current administration and ICE, as well as, in quieter tones, those in our community who are vulnerable. And we do have members of our community and members of our workforce who are vulnerable. So it is, I think, important that we dispel the myth that this won't happen here. I think the only thing that we have seen is that this is a bit of a, there's a bit of a randomness, or worse, maybe even some patterns that actually do suggest that we could be affected. So I wanted to start with that because I think sometimes there is a false sense of security that says that, oh, this shouldn't be a priority, but I think that there is both general anxiety among our residents who we're a vocal, passionate group of people here in Newton, and then also an acute anxiety among a smaller population. So when it comes to a few of the things that I think we can be doing, I wanted to first just piggyback off of what my colleague, Councilor Greenberg, was asking. I think I have an unusual distinction of actually being an employee inside another city that has received guidance of what to do. For those of you who don't know, I work at Boston City Hall. And I am just a little confused, Mr. Morse, about why it is difficult to create a 1 to 2 page document with guidance and to be emailing that to our city employees. I don't mean to be cute about that question. I just think that this is something that the natural next step coming out of an EO, like the one that we issued, that is talking about federal agents potentially coming into our city buildings, is to then be empowering our city staff with information to say, and if this happens in your building, here's what you should do. So I would love to hear a little bit more about, this has been now 6 to 7 weeks since that EO was issued. It's been over a year since this threat has been in place. I think there's no surprises. So can you just elaborate on when we can expect to see some guidance to our city employees? And in particular, maybe also related, within those city buildings, how will the city employees be able to actually designate which places are public parts of those buildings and which places are non-public parts of those buildings, since we have not committed to having signs? So that's sort of a two-part question there about the employee guidance and training, but then also about signs inside of our city buildings. Thank you.
Um, uh, Counselor Charm, thank you for your question. I did want to clarify that, I certainly am familiar with the guidance that the city of Boston issued to its employees. And what I want to share with you and be clear, just because we haven't issued something in writing similar to what Boston did, which by the way, just followed the executive order, we have had conversations. As you know, City of Boston has 20,000 employees. We are significantly smaller than that, and can much more effectively, because of our size, communicate with department heads on a direct basis. And so, um, since the inception of what we have seen on TV and heard about in the news in terms of immigration enforcement, we have been talking to department heads about what to do if ICE comes. We fielded their questions, and we continue to do that on a weekly basis. So department heads or departments that get questions from some of their employees, or perhaps get questions from a resident who happened to be at the library or at a counter or something like that. My office is fielding those on a weekly basis, and we're providing guidance to those departments on what to do. So I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that because the city hasn't issued a 2-pager or a 1-pager about what to do, that we haven't been taking this extremely seriously, and we haven't been talking to people internally about what to do. I also think what has to be said after that is what Josh said, that this is a fluid situation. And so we have tried to be as nimble with folks as we can to come back and to continue to talk about it, to say, I see we will probably have new questions because of what we've seen in the news, and we're talking about that. So I just wanted to say that before looking forward. I just don't want to leave the impression that we haven't addressed this internally.
Thank you. Thank you, Ally. And thank you, Councilor Charm. I think those are great questions. I've worked for the city for 18 years. I've seen a lot of policies laid out over the years. I will tell you from my perspective, both as a employee who started with the city in entry level and then moving my way up, most of those policies that came out as written policies were handed out, read, and then put to the side. I think one of the benefits of having a smaller city, at least in comparison to Boston, is that we do have that opportunity to have that ongoing dialogue. And I think that's extremely important in a situation like this, where it is very fluid, and the situations and the conditions and the information that we're getting, whether it be from the state or our peer communities, is ever changing. It's a different climate out there, and the questions are changing. The thing I find fascinating is that our staff are not homogenous. They're much like our community. There are people with lots of different questions, and they run the whole spectrum. Some people's questions are very simple, others are more complicated, but they're ongoing, and so the training needs to be ongoing. So again, I do think that it's valuable that we are approaching this with kind of the one-on-one conversations with the department heads, giving them the tools they need to help inform their staff in this fluid and ever-changing environment.
Councilor Charm, are you all set? I don't see any hands. I see one hand on Zoom, but I just want to make sure you finish up. Okay, all right. All right. So we have been joined on Zoom by Councilor Sean Roach, Ward 6, who has his hand raised. Councilor Roach, thank you for joining us this evening. Your hand is up, and go right ahead.
Bear with me for 1 second. Okay, so thank you, everybody from the administration for joining. Thanks for the presentation, Ally. So on the topic of public comment, I just want to note that And I know this is in itself a fraught topic because there is, I think, legitimate concern that if we have a hearing with public comment or we have a session with public comment, that one, it will attract some folks who might have ulterior motives that are non-productive, and also that it may draw attention to the city in a way that then draws attention and enforcement in the city that we wouldn't want. That's one risk. But I think that we should articulate that there's another risk. And I think this is the risk that many of the folks who want public comments are worried about, and that is the risk that we're not doing enough to protect, again, those three categories of folks: residents, workers, and visitors. So I think the key, and maybe this meeting has begun that process, but I think the best outcome would be if the folks who want public comment because they're uncertain about the administration's actions on these issues, if they were given assurance that the administration is doing everything, then maybe we don't need that public hearing, and maybe we can pay more attention to the risk of drawing attention. But I don't think the concern about drawing attention overwhelms necessarily the countervailing concern about particular action. So one of the things that we've talked about is body cameras. And if I missed it, I may have missed it, but I don't think so. One of the things that would be really helpful is if the city police were wearing body cameras. I've heard Mayor Laredo say in various forums that there are obstacles in the way of body cameras. I had a very productive conversation today with Chief Hoon, who may want to provide some background on that. But I feel better today that while getting body cameras onto Newton Police is not a trivial effort, that there's a commitment by the chief and by the mayor to get that done, and I'd like to see that. I think that would be an important piece of the public safety situation. And I'll if you could hold for now, Chief Cahoon's, your comments on that. I have a few other things. So the public safety issue is a very complex one. It's been described as potentially a blue on blue problem, where you have police on one side and police on another side, and it's very complicated because what the reason for actions on either side can be very difficult to unpack. Mayor Laredo has talked about we're not wanting to put Newton police officers in jeopardy, physical jeopardy, legal jeopardy, and given the complexities, these are very real concerns. It's also a very novel public safety issue. We have ICE is widely recognized as poorly trained, hyper militarized. They have a questionable mission, and they are creating a new category of public risks. And if we go back to the chief's introduction to us at public safety and transportation, policing in general is a constantly evolving activity that needs to be responsive to new threats. And this is a new threat. And I've asked the chief, and I hope he'll address it here, that he work with his peers to understand how a city like Newton can best protect, again, those three categories: residents, workers, and visitors, in light of this new public safety risk. Federal officers are actually creating the risk, and this is what makes it so novel. This needs new strategies, it needs new training. The fact that the welcoming city ordinance says that there are certain areas of the city that are off limits, I think an important step here, given the current situation, would be to mark those out. What places are off limits? It's something the municipalities can do. It's something Newton could do. Mr. Morris, in terms of the policies, I appreciate the fact that things are evolving. But one of the things that we do know about the city staff's interaction with ICE is that it's going to, when it happens, it's going to happen fast. And I would love to know that our city staff have available to them when things are crazy, something written down that they don't have to recall from memory that says, here's what you need to do. Here's what you need, who you need to call. Here's what you need to ask for. A playbook that they can follow. If that playbook has to evolve, that playbook has to evolve. I think it would be very useful, especially given what we've learned tonight about steps that the administration has taken. If there were a task force, a standing task force that was comprised of administration folks, police folks, and city councilors, education folks, school department folks, who can work together confidentially to monitor things, to develop policies, to develop the distribution of policies, so that we are doing this in a coordinated fashion. That would be my one request of the mayor, to set that up and get that staffed immediately, so that there's communication across the different bodies. And my last point, and then Chief Cahoons, if you could address the body cameras and the new strategies, and if Mr. Morris, we can address the written policies. That when the Welcoming City Ordinance was written, the word terrorism, the concept of terrorism, had a very different salience than it does today. Right now, terrorism is a word that's being used. It's a justification being used much more broadly than it would have been used when the Welcoming City Ordinance was enacted. And we need to maybe come back and revisit that, so that not every undocumented person is considered a terrorist threat, and not every documented person who's here with perhaps some minor criminal or civil violation is considered a terrorism threat, which is what's happening. So that terrorism exception is an awfully big one that threatens to swallow the whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Roach. Chief Cahoon, you want to address the body cameras, and then I guess COO Morris, if you want to address the written policies to employees.
Great. So first of all, and I appreciate the comments and the questions, well thought out, and I know it's high on a lot of people's minds. The priority of the Newton Police Department is definitely to ensure the safety of all residents, regardless of status, in accordance with Massachusetts law. We don't enforce civil immigration laws. We're not authorized by the Lund decision in 2017 or the Welcoming City Ordinance to arrest, detain based solely on ICE detainers nor administrative warrants. We do not participate, assist in any way with civil immigration enforcement. But it should be said to us, we have no role in determining the legality or the tactics that federal officials use. But we remain committed to protecting the rights of all people in this community. It should be said, we don't supervise or direct federal immigration agents, and we're not permitted to obstruct, interfere with federal agents that are acting in the scope of their authority. However, as you know, in this community, we don't ask about immigration status with any interaction with any resident, and we do that for a reason. We don't want to chill the availability of any city service to include victims or witnesses to crimes. And we want to make sure people are comfortable coming to us. And that's vitally important, and that's part of what the Welcoming City Ordinance reaffirms. You know, ICE and federal authorities operate under their federal authority. We are accountable to our citizens. We are accountable to Mass General laws. We are accountable to post standards, and we work every day to ensure all residents feel safe. Now, before I address I'll probably address the body cameras. We'll talk a little bit about the blue on blue that Councilor Roach put on the table. And then after that, I'd like to have Lieutenant Hendrickson talk about some of the outreach we do to underserved communities, also with people of different undocumented or documented status. So the body cameras, I know this has been in the works for some time. There are some labor issues involved. A pilot program was recently negotiated, both with our superior officers and our patrol officers. That is up and coming. We're going to do that as soon as we can. I had discussions with finance recently about funding that in this operating budget coming up. The agreement, there were some logistical issues to work through, but that is high on the priority. And because of the agreements with labor, that has to happen before we implement the whole program. The barriers to implementing that whole program are logistically involved. We're going to need more staff. It comes with a heavy lift as far as redaction software and not just the money, because the money is significant. But we're going to have to get some staff in place that can alleviate the burden of some of those more labor-intensive FOIA requests. There's some significant privacy issues related to body camera footage, and we want to make sure all of those things are in place. But there is currently an agreement with both labor unions that it would affect, where we're going to continue with that pilot program. I can tell you, I wish we had them tomorrow. I can tell you it's a priority. The mayor's office wants it. The city wants it. The cops want it. It's going to be a great tool for us, not only in making sure there's proper oversight and to ensure that I think it's going to be a huge tool to show the community exactly what we do. Because I think when people understand what these officers do day in and day out, they get a better understanding of what kind of quality police department the officers we have in the Newton Police are. With regard to the difficulties when it comes to, Council Sean Roach mentioned blue on blue. And basically what that means is when you have two forces accidentally, two armed law enforcement, or it even happens in the military, accidentally engaging one another. Although that could be a concern should we get called to a scene where people are unsure what's happening, right? And the best thing to alleviate that, whether it's in the military, the police departments, different disparate police departments or agencies working together, is communication. And I'll come back to that piece in a minute, but that's accidental. What we don't want to do is on purpose have two armed police forces opposing one another. And that's where I take I want to take a step back to make sure we're not putting police officers in a very difficult, in an unwinnable position. And it's a very nuanced thing, but the blue on blue certainly is a concern. I couldn't put it better than Councilor Roach did when he said it's definitely a new paradigm that we're working through now. Local police, state police, and federal authorities do work together. That information flow is important. However, in this context, we're not only prohibited from providing or sharing information related to civil immigration enforcement, but it's also not within our purview. We wouldn't have anything to do with it. But it is a new paradigm, and we have been working, when I say we, executive leadership and law enforcement all over the state, all over the country is dealing with how best to approach this. There is no simple answers, but I can tell you those discussions are robust and ongoing. Today I had many. Yesterday I was sitting with many chiefs talking about the same issues over and over and over again. And I think it comes back again to communication. So if we have an understanding of things that are happening in our city, we can better approach that. And I mean that even with the federal authorities, that communication is both ways. And I wish I had I wish we had all this worked out already. We do not, but we certainly hear it loud and clear, and we're working towards that. And I'm actually going to turn it over to the lieutenant. And I think it's important to kind of highlight and illustrate a lot of the outreach we do do, which would include some of the communities we're talking about in this context.
For those of you that have not met me before, I'm Amanda Hendricks and I'm a lieutenant with the police department, and I'm currently assigned to run our Community Services Bureau. I'm here just to talk a little bit to let you know that we have a number of specialized officers here within the police department, including our domestic violence officer, civil rights officer, youth investigators, detectives, all that, and also with our general officers that have received training on helping our most vulnerable residents and community members, especially those that are families and survivors of domestic violence. We have officers that sit on various meetings each quarter and each month. We have a close relationship with the Middlesex District Attorney's Office, in which we attend trainings in the Anti-Hate Bias Task Force. We also have representatives on here in the Newton Human Rights Commission. We regularly receive training and monitor through various nonprofit groups, so that way we can speak with residents and refer them to appropriate resources by keeping and maintaining close relationships with members of the school department, as well as members of Health and Human Services, leaders of our houses of worship here, which are safe places and allies for many of our residents and community members. And so we hope that by here and just talking here to let you know that we're continuously doing work to try to find out different places that we can refer survivors and residents, our victims and witnesses to. We'll hopefully continue to build that trust within the community and have additional advocates here that can make sure people that need help from the police department can come. For instance, my bureau, the Community Services Bureau, and our detectives were located in an annex building. We're not located at Maine Police Headquarters, which is surprising to many people, but is also helpful for us when we're trying to set up meetings and have get statements from people, whether it's at the courthouse or whether it's in our building. We also will work with advocates, the victim witness advocates in the courts closely, so we can set up safe places and meetings for people off-site. So there's definitely many avenues that we can work to help people get the help that they need or learn about where they can get the help that they need. And that is constantly evolving. We're constantly working to be better at that. And so hopefully here in this meeting is a first step that you can trust that we are constantly working to understand the climate that people are feeling within our community here, and that we're going to keep working to create an avenue so people feel safe reporting. Thank you.
All right. Yoel Morse, do you want to just address that last one? I think that might have already been addressed previously. Spot up.
Chair Lucas, can I follow up with one with Lieutenant real quick on one of the points?
Yes, go ahead.
So Lieutenant, are you seeing any chilling effects that ICE activity has had on victims of domestic violence and other crimes, reporting those crimes? But I know that that's a big issue, right? That folks now fear using city services, especially police services, because that they worry that will lead to ICE enforcement. Are you seeing any of that chilling?
So I didn't get the first part of your question, I didn't hear it. I don't have any statistical information to say that we're seeing a decrease in reporting, as many here may or may not know. It's very difficult for survivors of domestic violence to come forward and when they're able to actually come and report, and to get them to have a safe avenue all the way through prosecution. So I can't say whether or not I've seen a reduction in reporting based on what is happening, just because I can't speak statistically to that. I don't have that demographic information. However, we are very sensitive. Our domestic violence officer maintains close contact with many of the nonprofit and advocacy groups throughout here in the city. And we have resource cards available to people, but then we also make sure that we let our first line officers know what those resources are, especially the ones, the Asian American Task Force. That is, there's a Boston office. There's some different organizations that we want to make sure that there's various places where we can send people, so that way they have the resource that they need, even if they're not ready to maybe disclose to police officers. So I can't tell you whether or not there's been a change, but we definitely are very much aware that that could be an impact.
Thank you.
All right, Councilor Roach, thank you very much for the other questions. So a few of these I'm just going to take note of. There's something that we're going to have to discuss more internally. For example, your question about the word terrorism in our welcoming city ordinance. Words matter, and I think that's really what you're saying, because the definition of that certainly may have evolved, but I think that's something that we'll have to take back and consider. I will also say, I said it before, but I think it's worth repeating. It is a fluid situation. We are not rigid in our thinking, and I would encourage all of us to not be rigid in our thinking. It's important that we remain dynamic. Certainly from the administrator's perspective, when faced with new information, we are ready to pivot and respond accordingly, not only with what we say, but with what we write and what we have written. So we will certainly take a look at that. Happy to get back to you on that. I took note of your desire for a task force as well. That's something we can certainly consider. Again, we have a strong team internally working on this every day, but I do understand what you are seeking, which is some external involvement in that as well. I think I covered that.
Yep. All set, Councilor Roach?
Signs and written policies.
I'm sorry?
Signs and written policies for staff.
Oh.
So I'll do the written or the written policies for staff first. So I think as Ali Giuliani, city solicitor, explained, we are currently working with our department heads who train our staff on a day-to-day basis. I certainly appreciate your comment about having written policies. I will say, as somebody who served in the United States Navy on submarines, when a crisis happens, we had written policies, but if we relied on written policies, I would not be here today. You have to train, you have to drill, you have to have dynamic training. Those written policies in the middle of an emergency, at least in my experience, you're not running to a written policy to figure out what you should do, or you will not be successful in what you're trying to achieve. So I think it is important that we continue to work with our department heads and have our department heads work with our staff to provide ongoing training, so that their staff are prepared in the moment with the knowledge that they need to be able to respond accordingly. With respect to signage, I think signage is a challenging situation. I think that our welcoming city ordinance and our executive order both make it crystal clear that the Immigration Enforcement Agency, ICE, is not welcome on our city property. They are not permitted to be on our city property. If they are going to ignore our welcoming city ordinance and an executive order, I do not believe they will be deterred by signage. So I think the signage would be more to make a statement that I don't think ICE is going to adhere to. I also have just personally some concerns that I don't think we want to set up a situation where we're creating a false sense of security, whereby the theory that there is signs means that ICE will not cross that line. So I think that exists not only on our open space around the city, but I'm also concerned about creating areas in the city. I certainly appreciate that we need to identify areas in our city buildings that are staff only, and I think that's important for a number of reasons beyond the current conversation. But I think if we're putting up signage that indicates that this is a safe space or a private space, if it is not something that is going to deter ICE, I think it creates, again, a false sense of security that could be problematic.
Okay. Thank you. All set, Counselor Roach?
Just two quick follow-ups. So, Mr. Morse, if you're gonna, see my request for written policies and raise it to regular training, the level that you must have had in the Navy, that sounds great. But that's, there's, training that's kind of a one-time deal. There's written policies, which you can, a quick guide playbook to what you're talking about. If you're getting that level of, if you're giving that level of training, if our staff are getting that level of training, that's something that the administration needs to be clear. And again, the task force would be a great way to get that communicated out. As for the signs, I don't think ICE is reading our ordinance, basically reading the executive order. They're going to see a sign, they're not going to see a sign. I do accept the deterrence. I think it's a little bit, it's a fuzzy area, and I accept that. But I don't think that we can expect ICE to be reading the ordinance or the executive order. But I appreciate the thoughtful responses, and look forward to the evolving situation, the evolving conversations.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Roach. So Counselor Block and Counselor Irish, you have raised your hands, but I know Counselor Krinsman raised his hand and he may need to leave early tonight. So would you mind if he jumps in front of you? Don't mind? Counselor Krinsman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. And I do have to leave in about 15 minutes. So I really appreciate the courtesy. First, I want to say that I appreciate all the responses that I've gotten from the mayor's office, and I appreciate you all being here tonight, Mr. Morse, Ali, Chief, Lieutenant. Very much appreciate you being here and answering the questions. I think it's important, and again, I think it's valuable. I think a number of us everyone I've spoken to, including city officials, have been really troubled by what they've seen happening nationally, and I haven't seen a wide diversity of response to that. I think many people have said that sort of we're all rowing in the same direction, and I agree with that. I think there's a lot of agreement from the people I've spoken to in terms of the substance of decisions that are being made, of what the community response ought to be. There's a lot of agreement. Really appreciate all that. I think there is plenty of consternation in our community, both elected officials and residents, by what they see going on nationally. I think that there is broad agreement on what the response of the city should be. I think that consternation is complicated by uncertainty. I think the antidote to uncertainty is information and certainty, and a reassurance of what's going to happen. Okay, when snow falls, people don't freak out because they know the roads are going to get plowed. People aren't in a constant panic because they know what happens if they dial 911. When it comes to this situation, there's more uncertainty around that. And so what I have been advocating for is information. I want people to know what's going to happen. I'm not in large disagreement about decisions you've made. I'm sure that the decisions that are being communicated to department heads are wise, they're thoughtful, they're thorough, they're probably great. My concern is that I want to make sure all city employees know what's expected of them, what's not expected of them. But I also think it's important that residents know what's expected of city employees and what's not expected of city employees. Because if residents have accurate expectations, then they can respond to those, right? People may disagree. Again, I don't disagree with anything. But I think people ought to understand what they should, again, and what they should not expect from their city officials. I think this mayor in particular has been great about communicating his decision process to residents. I mean, as an example, the snow and then forcing a trash delay, right? And saying, okay, we're going to have to forego Friday trash collection in this area of the city. It sucked for some people, but it was much more it was received in a lot better fashion because it was explained. I think we have an opportunity here to explain to folks what decisions have been made, why they've been made, if that's warranted. But But that's the one area where I have a little bit of concern that we haven't yet communicated effectively all the decisions that have been made. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I mean, I'm happy to, hear from folks if you want to respond to that, but that's why, the stuff about moving information on the website to be more prominent. I know a number of us have talked about some sort of questions we get, more frequently than others, and having prepared responses to those that we can distribute that can then get distributed throughout the community so folks know what to expect.
Thank you, thank you, Councilor Krinsman. I feel weird talking to you, but not looking at you. So I appreciate that. And I know the work that we're currently doing and the updates that you're going to soon see on our website certainly will speak to a good portion of that. And like I said, this will be a continuing dialogue. I think it's important that we continue this not only in committee, but as you are hearing from your constituents, as you are absorbing probably a lot of the same information that we are absorbing every day. If you have thoughts or suggestions, please continue to reach out to us.
Okay, we've got quite a bit of hands. Let me just give you the order. We're going to go in Councilors Block, Irish, Farrell, Bixby, and then Charm in that order. Councilor Block.
Thank you, Chair. There are quite a number of nonprofit organizations active in this field. One of the more prominent is LUCE, which stands for Liberation Union Community Esperanza. And they did a training in the War Memorial last week, which was publicized by the mayor's office. They run a 24-hour hotline for people to report possible sightings of ICE agents. This is outside of our municipal activities. And I think perhaps people need to know more about where they can go in the advocacy realm to get information, to volunteer. There are really a lot of opportunities for people to do so, quite apart from vigils. There's real work being done, and it's being done, as best I can tell, in a very professional way, training-based, lots of information flowing, lots of concern about security and privacy of people. Using encrypted methods of communication. These organizations have really thought things through. I'm very impressed by them. I have personally encouraged people to explore the different ways in which they can get directly involved. And I share that information because I'm an elected official and information comes to me, but I don't expect city employees to take on that role. I think it's up to each individual to figure out what it is they want to do under these current very stressful circumstances. As Councilor Krinsman said, I doubt there's very much difference of opinion among all of us about what's going on in this country, but what individuals should do and what a city should do or what a state should do, that's where things get more difficult to figure out, like the whole signage thing. I mean, we could sort of debate, I guess, something as simple as that. But in the meantime, there's real work going on out there having nothing to do with us. And frankly, I think that's better. I think it's better that nonprofits lead in something like this and that people know where to go. Now, for the mayor's office to have publicized the LUCE training, when I saw that, I was actually a little surprised. Pleased, but surprised. I didn't expect that. So maybe there are decisions that we need to make as a city regarding information in these other places. that we want people to be able to find easily. That doesn't mean we put their information on our website. It just means Lucé has its own website. We don't need to recreate that. They have their own hotline. We're not going to duplicate that. And it's great that the kind of work that they're doing. And by the way, they're not the only organization out there doing very concrete things in this area. But I think maybe we can do a better job helping people figure out what they would like to do on an individual basis. And that's sort of my plea. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Block. Councillor Irish, go ahead.
Hello? Okay. Thank you, Chair. And thank you to everyone being here again, to have members of the police department and our city officials here. We've covered a lot of ground, and I feel like we have a lot of good information, and thank you for sharing that. And also to my fellow counselors for bringing up some great points, and to residents who were sending a lot of concerns to to the city council. What I've been hearing is from everyone is to follow up on Councillor Krinsman and Block is information. And I think what it comes down to is looking for that reassurance, that guidance. If something happens, what do we do? And I'm going to be very blunt about it. If they were to show up tomorrow on the streets of your neighborhood, mine, what do we do? Do we go to the website? Do we call the police? Do we call Lucé hotline? And I think and what's the role of the police? I think that's where people just want to know that if something happens tomorrow or next week, there's a plan. And believe me, I know it sounds like there's incredible work and policy going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of. But just to know what to expect, because I think expectations, but what to do, because that feels like kind of helpless when you don't know what to do. And having some information, I think that's a start. And I think it's been raised that having some clear guidance and information for city officials, but I think for the community, the residents and everyone, if something were to happen, just what do we do? And what's the right thing to do? Not to keep our police officers safe, to not create more fear. That's it. Just the basic information. And I know you've thought a lot about it and how to communicate. I guess that's it. It's just, as others have said before, is getting that information, a basic scenario. How does the ordinance apply to a real-time ICE presence if they were to show up? And I don't know, you may not be able to address because it is fluid, and who knows, create a scenario, but maybe having that actual scenario on the website is something. If they show up at the schools, if they show up, this is who you call. These are the nonprofits. Just that. So I think that would go a long way in making people feel less fearful and have some reassurance that the city, all that good work, policy work, and thinking and planning and conversations is just put to work. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Irish. We had Councillor Farrell on Zoom. Mr. Starkey, do you see him on Zoom right now? Okay, all right. Looks like he has an internet connection problem. So we're going to go to Councillor Bixby, then Sean.
Thanks. And thank you all again for being here and talking all this through with us. So I think a lot of different ideas were raised tonight. And, I know there's been a lot of feedback and, commitment to go back and discuss or see. Are there certain things that you do think that were raised tonight that you can commit to? And among other important things, I'll resurface what Councillor Greenberg started as perhaps a relatively more straightforward lift of translations. But are there other things that were raised tonight that we are not currently doing or publicizing that you can commit to now? And on the many items that we need to discuss more and need feedback from or more information on, what can we expect in terms of more information? How will we hear that, and how will the public hear that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bixby. So I would say that I'm taking good notes, and those of you that know me well know that I don't forget anything either. Blessing and a curse. I would say that we are definitely are already working on our website. We work on it behind the scenes before it goes live, so which is appropriate and normal. So we are absolutely committed to making it more visible. That will happen, and it will happen in short order. Thank you very much for your comments on the translation services. I think that that's low-hanging fruit. We can work on that as well. And I think we are committed to getting additional information up there. And that additional information, again, a lot of this I'm taking notes of your feedback here. To Councilor Irish's point, we certainly cannot put out information that will cover every possible scenario. It is impossible. But I do appreciate that there is value in putting out some basic information, because I think for the most part, most questions are pretty standard. You can what if these scenarios a lot, and that's endless, quite frankly. And those are good things for us to think about. We need to what if those scenarios because we need to be prepared. But I don't think we could have a written answer for all of those. And I don't think that's what's being asked. So I think those are things that we can commit to. I think some of the other stuff just quite frankly requires some additional research. I do like Councilor Block's suggestion about where we can direct people to other resources that are out there. I think in my experience, when people are feeling scared or concerned about issues like this, empowering them is an important step. And sometimes empowering them means pointing them in the direction of resources that are already readily available. Oh, and how we communicate that out? That's a good question. I think that we have multiple means of communication. Certainly we'll be in communication with the city council. I think it's in general, when we make changes to our website, we like to tell people about that, regardless of what the topic is. And we have a lot of different ways of communicating that. But certainly we'll work with the mayor's with the whole team in the mayor's office to figure out how best to connect with all interested parties.
All set, Councilor Bixby? Okay. Councilor Farrell, I see your hand raised on Zoom. Thank you for joining us this evening. Just you want to unmute and it's all yours.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. One of the things I just learned is that you always, in an emergency, need to be prepared with lots of batteries or battery power. I just lost my phone for about 5 minutes. But anyhow, I think, if I may add something maybe a little bit different to this conversation, but the issue that we are talking about is one of trust. And I think we have an extraordinary police department and fire department, the two that are most engaged in probably the issue that we're talking about. And I would like to remind us, and I would like the city, we as part of the city, remind residents that it's a two-way street. While it's important to see police and fire on the streets and recognize their presence and that that's helpful, I would like to encourage all of our residents, I would like to see more of this encouragement be that when you see a cop or a firefighter, walk up and say, "Hi, my name is so-and-so. Thank you for your service and thank you for what you're doing for them." And really begin to know them and at least begin to express to those departments that we admire them, we respect them. And when they tell us in an emergency situation to stop, that we trust them and we will stop. So I guess if the note is, I think it's a two-way street. We need to go out of our way every time we see a policeman or a firefighter and anybody else that we recognize as city employee, but certainly those departments because they're so distinguishable, and go out of our way to go and say, thanks, appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Farrell. Let's see, we have Councilor Charm. You had raised your hand. And does any other hands want to go up? Don't see any. Go ahead, Councilor Charm.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate many of the viewpoints that have been raised here tonight. I think what you're hearing is a chorus of a request for more information, to be setting and managing expectations, to be helping people understand where there are boundaries of what the city can and cannot do, what the city will and will not do. I wanted to engage in a quick dialogue with the chief, if he will humor me, on one that is a topic that I have heard many questions about. And this is just to put information in the public domain and to be setting expectations, because actually, Chief, when we first met, you, I thought, made an excellent point, which is so much of, and this is also to Councilor Farrell's point, so much of what we need to be doing is to be setting expectations for, yes, residents' benefit, but also for our officers' benefit, right? So that everyone knows if people are going to be arriving on a scene, what should they expect is going to happen. And so just on this one, I trust that we will be having many other conversations about addressing some of these information gaps. But just on this one, Chief, if you'll humor me. So 3 questions for you. If a resident sees federal agents or masked people that they believe might be federal agents, would you recommend that they call 911?
So I'm going to take it 2 different ways there. First, if they see masked people and they don't know whether it's federal agents and it's somebody encroaching on their property or they're concerned, yes, 100%. We want to make sure that there's not something else going on nefarious. Fair enough. If they know it to be immigration, I would rather them call a business line and approach it that way. We don't want to tie up necessarily, unless there's extraordinary circumstances going on. I never want to chill the response of our emergency system. If there is something else going on that's more than what they believe is federal civil immigration enforcement, I would rather that be through a business line than tying up that emergency communication. Does that make sense? And even in that, if we didn't know they were operating in the city or we had no heads up, which quite frankly, I don't know that we would. We would be happy to ensure, number one, if there's a disturbance, we can respond to that and try to at least, for lack of a better word, but trying to set some people at ease and see if we can be neutral observers and concerned with the public safety of that issue. But again, if there was something more going on, I don't want that to come out by the chief law enforcement officer in this community saying, do not call 911. We don't want to chill that. But if it's just I don't want to, there's no other reason to believe that there's nothing nefarious or illegal going on, I would call the business line.
Okay, quick follow-up on that
Yes.
front. So just last week, there was an escalation in our neighbor Burlington, Vermont, and many residents showed up and were seeking to protect. And I, don't want to go down to too many different hypotheticals, but I think we are a community where I think people are active, and so I think I think it's a reasonable thing to think that there might be situations where there are bystanders, and if there is, an encounter where there are multiple bystanders and things are escalating, should someone on the side be calling 911? Should they be calling a business line? Is that something where it's like, this is sort of not something that would be worthy of tying up our emergency line?
Well, I mean, if there's a concern for an emergency, I would call 911. If it's escalating to the extent that people are that concerned, I would just be very clear about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's important. We talk a lot about expectations, and I can appreciate that. The expectations of what officers are authorized to do and what they are not is important. We can't obstruct, we can't impede. They would be subject to being charged with a crime, which has its whole host of issues beyond that. But the same goes for the public. We are absolutely encouraged, and this community is full of people that are engaged, and that's a good thing. We come to solutions that way. But we absolutely encourage folks to speak their mind, to peacefully protest, to do all of those things that they're entitled to under the Constitution, but they cannot impede or nor obstruct or commit any other, crime, whatever it may be, or they could be subject to federal, running afoul of federal laws or state laws for that matter. So we would expect our residents, and I would expect nothing less in this community, that they would conduct themselves in a manner that's consistent with the Constitution and making sure they don't run afoul of that either. But for your follow-up, if things are escalating, I would just be very clear. We operate on information. So officers, the one thing I want to be clear about on expectations is I want to make sure the officers have an understanding, right? And we've talked a lot about this, all of us. Picture the officer on the street who may or may not be, 2 years on the job and showing up to a rapidly evolving, uncertain circumstance where they have no idea maybe what prompted this. Now, is this a protester or is this somebody wanted for a heinous crime? And let's say there's a scuffle or something going on the ground. I don't want the expectation of the public to think that that officer is going to make that rapid determination in seconds that, quite frankly, could be litigated for years. So that's the caution that we have, and I just don't want to put officers in a position with unrealistic expectations.
Thank you. You actually hopscotched to my third question, but my second question is more on when NPD arrives on the scene, what specifically can officers do to help, or what should people expect? Maybe I'll rattle off a sense of my understanding of what we can say, and feel free to edit that. So my understanding is that Newton Police can respond to the scene. They can seek to verify whether the persons are in fact federal agents versus, for example, a masked intruder on someone's property. They can seek to de-escalate the situation using their training. They can legally observe and document the activities that are going on, knowing that they do not wear body cams, but it's standard protocol for you all to be documenting events. And this documentation could be helpful in the future, should the DA's office decide to press charges or unlawful actions. And finally, the Newton Police Department can treat anyone who is injured or summon additional emergency response if needed. Are all of those expectations fair?
Yes, with nuance, if you will allow me. So the verifying the federal agents, if we show up and they're clearly federal agents that are emblazoned, we're not going to stop all activities and demand ID. Because that, again, could be interpreted as interfering, obstructing, but we would certainly try to help and at least maybe lower the temperature to the extent possible. That goes to de-escalation. All our officers, de-escalation is certainly a valuable tool, but I would submit to you that I've been involved in this business for 30 years. Any good cop has been de-escalating for 30 years, regardless of a program or a buzz, a phrase that we use quite frequently. We always try to do that. However, de-escalation is a two-way street. I can't de-escalate somebody who doesn't want to be de-escalated. So there's on both sides of that. And standard protocol, yes, in our officers would be documenting uncommon circumstances. If they arrive on a scene and somebody takes somebody in custody, whether it's civil immigration or not, absent anything that would call their attention to this was a different circumstance, they may not be just writing a report because they're observing the tactics of federal officials. That is not our job. However, if the situation degenerated into something more alarming, then I would expect the supervisors would want that documented. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then the last piece of it is what NPD cannot do, which I think you have referenced. So would Newton Police Department step between federal agents and Newton residents to protect them?
That's again, a lot of nuance and assumption built into that question. We cannot obstruct their duties. And it would have to be like the stars would have to align that we would, number one, the best way to explain this is the duty to intervene. Okay. The duty to intervene is very fact-specific mandate in Mass General Law that came with the reform bill. And that you have to have three things. You have to either know what's going on and be present. You have to observe clearly excessive force, which is not an easy determinative to make in the moment. And then you have to have a reasonable opportunity to intervene. If all of those things come together, we would expect that, yes.
Thank you for humoring me and going through this exchange. My intention here is, first of all, to share this information and help to set expectations on both sides, which I think is very important and part of this process of us all, starting to address some of this fear and anxiety that's building. And also to highlight that many of these things are nuanced, to your point. I hope that we can continue to have communication and discussion about this. I'm, glad to hear that we'll be having a follow-up hearing. Being able to, go to the next step and be able to do just as Councilor Block was suggesting, to say, if you are feeling more anxiety about this, here are 5 things that you can do to take action, where you can be able to actually, go out and help, to help those who are most vulnerable, whether that's helping to deliver meals or getting trained by Luce. With that, I yield. But thank you very much again to everyone.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Charm. Chief, I have some questions for you. They're kind of follow-ups from Councilor Charm and Councilor Roach, who we heard from on Zoom earlier. Just with Councilor Charm's question, you said that in some situations you would want Newton residents to call the business line in lieu of 911. Just be prepared that most people don't know the Newton business line telephone number, so it would be helpful if that information could get out somewhere. But also, if they do call 911 instead of the business line, are dispatchers trained to know that they need to forward that to the business line, so we don't tie up those emergency lines?
Yes. And I started 3 weeks ago. I don't even know the business line right now.
So,
I have it right here.
yeah, I was going to say our direct line is available. So our business line is on our social media pages. It's available on the homepage. It's also on the website. It's 617-796-2123, brings you directly into our dispatch center. 617-796-2100 is just a general line for the police department, which will bring you to various extensions to all of the various bureaus within it. But 2123, that extension will bring you directly to a call taker, which is one of our emergency telecommunications officers, also known as dispatchers. Mm-hmm. So that I think that what the chief said is you'll recognize an emergency. Hopefully when you see it, an emergency is different to each individual. And we understand that, we recognize that, but we just understand that we want people to know that, when you're calling 911, there's a reason why we have that service. And so we like to keep those lines clear if we can. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. And following up a question on Councilor Roach, he mentioned body cameras, and I'm grateful that there's a pilot program that may be underway soon. That was I think that was the very first question I asked the Chief Carmichael back in 2021 when he was up for his appointment here. And 5 years later, We're still working on that pilot program, but I'm very grateful that it's moving forward. But if they don't have body cameras, are the Newton Police allowed to use business cell phones and personal cell phones to record ICE if they feel as though they may need to?
If they have a business phone, yes, not everybody does. I would not want them to use personal cell phones, not in the course of their city business.
Yeah, all right, thanks. Ms. Giuliani, I have some questions for you as it relates to the executive order that was issued by the governor. I'm sure you are familiar with that. In that executive order, she says that ICE is not allowed to use any state-owned property to conduct their business. And I was just wondering, how does that state executive order affect Newton's welcoming city ordinance, or does it affect it in any way? Strengthen it, weaken it?
I would say the two work together to strengthen the idea that neither our state property nor the city property is going to be accessible to federal agencies to conduct the type of activity that folks are most concerned about. They work very well together to really double down on that protection.
Okay, thank you. And speaking with state property right now, the state does own property here in Newton. I believe the biggest one here, at least for a potential staging operation, would be the Riverside parking lot right off the highway, easy access. Have you already identified that and are working with state agencies to put up signage in any way to limit ICE's action at that particular location?
We at the city don't have a role in putting up signage on that property, but we are, I can certainly get back to you about what the state's plans are. We are in routine communication with our partners in the state on precisely this issue.
Okay, thanks. And then just while we're at state-owned property, I just want to, are there any other potential staging areas that the state owns? I'm thinking like Mount Ida, or if there are any state parks that you know of.
Other than Mount Ida, which is now owned by the University of Massachusetts, I'm not aware of any other property within the city of Newton, but certainly the governor's order, as well as the city of Newton's order, would protect those properties from this type of activity.
Okay, so basically if ICE were to arrive, they just have to operate on a city street, essentially.
Yeah, I mean,
Essentially, assuming they are going to follow the ordinance and the executive order, that pretty much limits them. Is that
that's
fair
right.
to say?
They, assuming they adhered to our local and state orders, they would be really limited as to where they would be able to operate.
Thank you. All right. Okay, Councilor Greenberg, I saw your hand up, so go ahead.
To follow up on that, Ms. Giuliani, so what if ICE were to occupy city property despite the executive order? How would the city and the police respond to that?
As I said before, we are in routine communication with our partners in the state about what to do if something like that were to occur. So I can assure you, one of our first calls within minutes would be to our partners at the state. Certainly, we've got legal avenues available to us, but filing lawsuits takes a little bit of time. We would react as quickly as we could in that regard. But as I said, we are working very closely with folks at the Attorney General's office to make sure that we're prepared if something like that happens, and we've got direct lines of communication to folks there to alert them to that and to come up with an action plan.
Okay. And then on another topic, to protect our officers and our residents, I think it would be the safest thing is that if these ICE officers were not masked and had identification, is there any way that we as a city could say that that is not allowed, that all official officers would have to be unmasked and identified? I think that would be the best for the safety of all our residents and for our police officers when interacting with folks that have masks and no IDs.
We've certainly heard that concern and appreciate it. Understand that this is an issue that the city council has looked into or is considering. Unfortunately, the city doesn't have any authority to govern how federal agencies will conduct their operations. So to the extent that their operations call for them to wear masks or to wear body cameras or whatever, or hide identification, I'm not suggesting that's what they do, but if their operations mandate for them to do that or call for them to do that, there really isn't a local ability to govern how federal agencies will operate.
I understand that, but I would think that if something were to run afoul in one of their operations, that if we had an ordinance in place that said these people cannot behave that way, wearing masks and no identification, that would be another legal avenue that we could pursue.
I can tell you that federal law will preempt a local law that seeks to govern what how federal agents should operate. So we're certainly willing to take a look to see if there are other avenues that we can pursue. But I want to set an expectation that I know this is a concern and something that folks are worried about and interested in pursuing, but there are certain constitutional concerns and preemption concerns that might pose an obstacle to us doing exactly that.
I appreciate you looking into that. Thank you. Yeah. And Chief, just one final question. Thank you. Last time we had met in committee, you had mentioned that the Massachusetts Chief of Police Association was working on updating the guidelines in dealing with ICE. Is that coming soon, or do you have any sense of when that will happen?
So there's been several legal guidelines set out, most of which I think we've talked about here, in the limitations of local authority as it relates to federal operations. I think even since last year, there's been 3 or 4 put out by the General Counsel and Mass Chiefs of Police Association. So those guidelines are helpful. But some of what I was talking about was how to best approach this, particularly in communities with proclamations or ordinances such as ours, how to best approach these. And those things are ongoing with the police chiefs that I talk to, and major city chiefs across Massachusetts, and also the Mass Chiefs Police Association. Every community has their own expectations. Every community is different. And, but we all certainly have the same concerns and issues on how we approach these things. So that's still ongoing, but the legal guidance comes from the lawyers associated with our 2 groups.
I see. Okay, thank you.
All
Thank
set?
you, Chair.
All right, thank you. So we're going to go to Councilor Silber, then Councilor Block.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for coming tonight. I think it's been helpful. I think a lot of the community is really pleased to have you here and answering questions. And I have 3 questions for 3 of you. So I'll start with Chief Cahoon. And is it reasonable to expect that the first notice that you will have of a ICE operation would be someone calling in?
Is that the expectation now, or the reasonable expectation?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is are you going to get do you expect to get any kind of notification, whether embargoed or confidential, from federal agents that an action might be happening in Newton?
So nothing is guaranteed. I would prefer that, because that way we'd be more prepared to take any calls from a resident, obviously. But I don't know that we'd get the call today. However, we do work with federal partners all the time, not just Department of Homeland Security or ICE. We do have people in task force. We do have open lines of communication in that regard related to criminal activity and how we can enhance public safety in our city. But honestly, I don't know. In the current climate, we may not get a heads up. That's my realistic expectation at this point.
Great, thank you. My second question is, I guess, for Ms. Giuliani, but are there any limitations for ICE staging on private property with the permission of or with or without permission of a property owner?
We don't have, our ordinance obviously covers city property. And we may be limited as to how we can govern how private property owners will utilize their property. However, again, this is an interesting hypothetical, one that is pretty nuanced, because I think I would have questions about how is this property owner going about letting out their property to a governmental agency. And there actually may be some ordinances on the books already here in Newton that would allow the city to say this is not permitted use within the city.
Great, thanks. And my third question for Mr. Morse, I think, is, so I think it was really helpful for you. I had a difficulty articulating the idea that we didn't want to create a false sense of security. And I'm sort of thinking through this as like, why don't we put these ordinances on the books? But I guess my question, or maybe Ms. Giuliani, is, are there, beyond the sense of creating a false sense of security, which I think is very reasonable, are there other reasons why we would not want to put some of these, we have a lot of ideas coming from the community. Are there other reasons we wouldn't want to put these types of ordinances like on the books, whether they might conflict federal preemption or not?
Counselor, just so I fully understand the question, beyond signage, can you clarify what other ordinances you might be referring to?
Well, I have a lot of emails from residents. So, I mean, I'm happy to send those on to you and you can take a look at them, but you may already be getting them all. I don't know. I guess the signage might be one. There are, I'm going to let my fellow counselors help me out because my computer's not connected, so I can't read through all of them, but there were sort of a number of different ideas out there. And, I like to be helpful. So when I can, I try to answer people, but I don't always have the answers of why or why not we might be hesitant to make modifications to our ordinances.
I will say that when the law department does a lot of work with the city council on not just proposed ordinances, but even before at the idea stage. And so I think it is a little bit premature for me to fully comment on that because we'd want to talk through a lot of what these ideas are to flesh out if there are any obstacles. I mean, one thing there's a lot to consider. Certainly we wouldn't, we always consider whether or not there are preemption issues when we consider any ordinance. So that's something that we would talk through, but I would say generally, I think any lawyer representing the city would also have a concern about putting something on the books that we know is unconstitutional, because if it is challenged, the decision we get against us could be worse than not having put the ordinance out. That's just something we talk through when we're thinking about ordinances and how far we want to go with something. So I just wanted to put that out. There's a lot to consider when we think about those
Thank you.
things.
That's really very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All set, Counselor Semper? All right, good. We're going to go Counselor Block, then Counselor Charm.
I want to just come back to the word that somebody used, I forget who, about empowering our citizens. The more I listen to this conversation, the more I hear about what concerns we have as a practical matter. If ICE shows up here and we're not likely to get advanced notice, the people on the street have to know what to do already. The action, it may sound odd, the action really isn't with us. The action is with everybody. So, you have Lucé's hotline number in your telephone? Is it in your contacts? Well, we can ask that. We can encourage people to get involved, but to lean on our police force and expect them to interfere with a likely federal operation, I'm sorry, I just can't imagine the complications. And the people who are willing to volunteer their time and to carry whistles and to put their bodies between federal officers and someone who is fearful about what will happen, well, they better be trained too. And they better understand what it means to be pepper sprayed and what it means to be arrested. And for people who are willing to do that, bless them. It's not for everybody. A lot of people have kids at home. They can't risk that. These are very, very personal decisions about how far you want to go under these kind of stressful circumstances. And I just think we need to spend more time providing information, not about city signs or, whether we put instructions in writing to whomever, but how does the average person learn about what they can do? And there really are quite a variety of opportunities out there. You don't have to be somebody who carries a whistle to put your body between a likely ICE operator. You can do lots of things short of that. And I would just plead with everybody, all of us who are elected officials, instead of imagining cutting edge challenges to federal operations and federal law, the action really isn't here. Thank you.
We've been joined by Councilor Albright, not on the committee, but always welcome. And now we're going to go to Councilor Charm.
Thank you, Chair. There's been some discussion about actions that we could take, whether those are things like putting up signs or things like ordinances, masks and identification, that I think there's a sense of like, well, maybe these things won't be effective. Maybe they won't actually deter, these agents from doing what they intend to do. So maybe they would just create a false sense of security, and so they're not worth doing. That's one perspective. And I would actually sort of separate things like signs versus, actually changing our local ordinances, which I think should be weighed more seriously. We don't want to be having laws on the books that are fluff. However, I heard someone talking about this, about saying that when it comes to, we may not be able to deter some of these actions, but we are able to litigate. We are able to observe and document and take this through the rule of law. And if we think that some of these things that are happening are against the law, or actually are literally against the executive order or welcoming city ordinance, and also, I would say, against sort of common humanity, but that's a side note. How do we be able to have those things on the books or signs on the walls or the policy visible to be able to be part of that case that we are building? And so when we talk about things like signs, I also, Mr. Morse, don't have a lot of illusions about the fact that a sign will be stopping some of these people. I do think that having, our common public be able to know that they can be observing and documenting, and to be getting that in the shot, and to be having our laws be where they should be, we are going to be able to help build the case. And this is, not something that it would necessarily be Newton, but as we are passing information back up to the Attorney General's office or to the District Attorney's office, and they're choosing which cases to be able to advance, having these lines in the sand, these signs on the wall, these, how can we be able to have these, what are the steps that are worth taking that we think can help us on the flip side? And I think that those things can also be valuable enough reasons to be able to have some of these things in place. Because, just saying, oh, someone walked through a door that they weren't supposed to walk through, being able to then plead ignorance later, or, not having a sign in a parking lot. And then there's all of these ICE cars. If we were able to actually just have that is much more effective in terms of having evidence in a credible case. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, Councilor Charm. I just want to assure you, we already are part of the case. We have been working with our partners at the state on the litigation piece of this since the minute the litigation piece of this became a potential. And I will say that our state attorney general and our governor take this very seriously and take the protection of our communities, including Newton, really, really seriously. We are already part of the case. I guarantee you that if there was something that the city, either through its city council or its mayor, should be doing and isn't in order to make us part of the case, I would tell you to do it. I am confident that our community, as well as a number of other communities, are the consideration of the state when they're thinking about how to, or if they need to sue on behalf of the state of Massachusetts. And they want to know what's happening here. They certainly don't want us to interfere, interfere is not the right word, make it more difficult for them to make a case for our communities. And I want to be really respectful of that. And I don't, I think communities are wise not to get too far ahead of our own selves to litigate before we're mindful of the grand litigation on behalf of our communities, either through the state or through some concerted effort. So I just want to assure you, like, we are part of the case already. We're not standing on the sidelines. We're fully aware of what's going on, and I'm really pleased to say we have got triggers that we can pull if something happens. And we're not just sitting by saying, well, federal government's just going to do whatever they're going to do. So I just wanted to assure you of that. We are part of the case. We don't, and if there was something we really should be doing and we aren't doing, I'd be the first person to tell you to tell the mayor of Newton that we should be doing. Quick question.
Thank you. Quick response there. Would it not, so I appreciate that you are in close contact with the AGO, and that they will be choosing, the best test cases and looking at the portfolio of all the different things and then advancing those strategically. I am glad that we have great people in great seats working on this. My question is really sort of from a just like tactical one of like, if you see, photo or video evidence of someone, barging past a sign, right, saying like, you shouldn't go through there, and then they're blatantly going through there, isn't that more effective than, like a photo or video of someone sort of barging through a door and being like, no, we promise that was like a non-public area? Does that question make sense?
I think so. But to that, I would just say, we don't need the sign to prove that it was a violation of the city's ordinance or executive order. We just need the action. And if it happens, it's a violation of the executive order or the ordinance. We don't need the sign to prove that. We need the ordinance and the executive order, which we have. Yeah.
All set, Counselor Charm? Okay, so we're going to go to Counselor Albright. We haven't heard from her yet, and then we're going to go to Counselor Irish and then Roach. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so sorry that I couldn't have been here from the beginning, and I'm sure I missed everything that's important. But I'll just picking up on the conversation that I'm hearing now. So not every city and town in our area has a welcoming city ordinance. And so the rules about not having ICE be in public buildings isn't the same in neighboring communities as it might be here. So how does, if ICE should happen to come to Newton, how would it know that they can't be in public, anything owned by the public, our city hall, our parking lots, our schools? How would they know that, as opposed to community X and Y, who are neighbors of ours who don't have a welcoming city ordinance?
The ordinance exists. I would say the fact that our mayor amplified that ordinance with his executive order in February at a press conference with a number of other neighboring communities is an excellent way to get the message out, that this is the way we require operation within our city.
What about, so we have a sign on all the major roads where you enter Newton, that we have a parking ban that begins on December 1st and ends on March 31st. What if we had at least one sign in the same locations that says we are a welcoming city, which means, X, Y, and Z? So maybe you don't want to put a sign in every public building and every public parking lot and so forth. But what if you at least put those signs at all the entry points to our city?
Thank you, Counselor Albright. I think that's something certainly we can discuss. Look forward to getting back to you on that.
Thank you, because I think it's at least as important as the parking ban. Thanks a lot.
Counselor Albright, we're not talking about the parking ban tonight. That was a couple weeks ago.
Thank
Okay?
God we're not
All right.
talking about the parking ban.
All right. Yes. Okay, so we're going to go to Counselor Irish, then Roach.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe I know the answer. Hopefully you already know the answer to this, but when speaking to peer communities, I know Mr. Morris mentioned that at the beginning, and I'm sure you have. Is there a sort of a set of best practices, but maybe not peer in terms of locale, but I'd be more interested in maybe communities that have had a large presence of ICE. Did they, whether it's Chelsea, Lynn, and where they've had to deal with it and do they have experience like, I wish we had done that, or like, we tried this, but that didn't work? So we have like real experience of what actually happens on the ground, even though their ordinances may be different from town to town. But I didn't know if that's something they share, or if that's part of your communication with their police departments, the legal departments, or the city, if there's the ones that have had the experience are sharing that with other cities.
So I appreciate the question. There is value in seeing what's working and what's not in other communities, but I can tell you, I talked to the Chelsea chief, I talked to the Everett chief, I talked to the Lynn chief, I talked to the Framingham chief, I talked to Springfield. And, everybody is having similar issues. I know in one community in particular, they issued an executive order, and they're having the same conversations in those communities. So there hasn't been much gleaned that we haven't tried to uncover here tonight from any of these other communities. I would love to see better communication all around. And by that, I mean, even if we could have conversations about when or why they would be coming into our city, or other communities, same thing, that would alleviate some of the pressure or the uncertainty that we're talking about tonight. And not that we could, if it was operational security, that we couldn't announce operations for officer safety, public safety issues, but at least we would be better prepared to handle that. I would love to see that. I know there's been some interest in some of the chiefs groups I've mentioned, and otherwise, in trying to get some of that improvement. But we're just not there yet. Thank you.
Councilor Irish, are you all set? Oh, I can't.
Yeah, unless there is similar sort of interest from other cities or the legal departments in other cities, if it's all other communication going. Just wondering if that's something. Thank you.
Yes, we are in communication with our neighbors in some of those communities about their experiences throughout this process. That line of communication has been open for quite some time. Yeah.
All set? Okay, good. Councilor Roach, you're on Zoom. Your hand is up. Go ahead.
Thank you. And sorry, I cannot come off video right now or back on the video. This conversation has been properly framed in the context of public safety, and I appreciate that. But I think it would be remiss if we didn't also talk about the larger context, and the mayor has been quite eloquent about this, that we are in a historical moment where the rule of law is being threatened, constitutional freedoms are being threatened, and I don't want us to lose sight of that in an overly dry discussion of kind of what is and isn't practically possible. And I don't expect that the answers to these questions necessarily would change, but I do want to make sure that we are fully aware of the magnitude of the moment, and that we don't lose sight of that. And I think it makes these discussions more complex. And I think that and I'm not sure tonight is the right time to do it, but I think understanding that constitutional concern, that historical concern, is what motivates a lot of the activity and interest from residents for more, makes Chief Cahoon's job more difficult, because that duty to intervene isn't just being viewed as a public safety issue, but it's being viewed as a kind of constitutional issue, a larger issue, like who is going to protect us from illegitimate forces or illegitimate activity. Now, I actually think that and I've had the advantage of some further discussion with him, but I do think that there are very real limits on what our police can do. But I do think that it is important to recognize where some of these concerns are coming from. It is safety, but it's not just safety. So I think there's more work to be done in diving into the details and some specifics and scenarios to help illuminate this problem. Not necessarily tonight, but I think we have an ongoing challenge here, again, because we're not just talking about safety. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Roach. I don't see any other hands up. So looks like we may be coming to the end of this discussion item. Councilor Greenberg, would you like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to hold, please.
Good, thank you. Any discussion on the motion to hold? Okay, for committee members only, in favor of holding, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The item is held. This is our only item on the agenda, and we are adjourned at 9:08. Thank you and good night.
Can you hit leave, please?